Hey everyone, it's Kate Sanchez, editor-in-chief of Pywel.net, and your resident game critic. I headed to LA to play a bit of Pearl Abyss's newest title, Crimson Desert. Pearl Abyss first announced this sophomore game in 2020 with a 4K high-quality gameplay footage trailer showcase. You know, it debuted. Since then, Crimson Desert hasn't really left my mind. That said, the mystery is part of what has been building the anticipation for the game for me. While the developer has released a significant amount of gameplay footage since its announcement, I haven't gone out of my way to hunt it down. Before attending the demo at the Pearl Abyss studio, I knew it was single player, and I knew that there were some Celtic and Norse iconography from the key art and some other images that I had seen. But that was about. Now, I didn't avoid looking things up because I wasn't interested. No. It was because after spending so much of my time at film festivals where I let trailers and PR material set expectation for films, I made the decision to walk into media without much, and in doing so, let the media speak for itself. And let me tell you, Crimson Desert was loud. In Crimson Desert, you play Kliff as he investigates events that transpire across the region of Hernand, and embarks on a journey of exploration through the vast open world. An open-world action-adventure game, the story focuses on mercenaries fighting for survival on the expansive continent of Pywel. After spending much of my time this past month playing Dragon Age the Veilguard and falling in love with the quick single-button press combat and pause-and-play strategy, I wasn't sure how the combat in Crimson Desert was going to feel. Sitting down at the table preparing for the demo, the sheet next to me had a series of combos that looked more like a fighter move list than combat inputs for an action-adventure game. However, once I jumped into the game itself, the combat immediately took hold. The choice to make combat in Crimson Desert combo-based is its strength. This choice also keeps the player from button mashing, which is sometimes my default in a new game when I encounter my first mob of enemies. With anxious hands, I tried to find my grounding, but I couldn't until I looked at the guide at my side. Once it was established that my combat choices needed to be thorough, everything clicked into place. There's a set of combos for kicks, sword swings, and grapples that include the perfect pro wrestling suplex, if you ask me, as well as your magical abilities. Add in blocking and parrying with your shield and judging when to use your bow, and there is more than enough to learn and work into paced rotation against enemies. That said, when you're being attacked from all sides, it's better to use the interactive environment to your advantage to take some of the anxiety away. However, as interesting as combat against the average enemy set is, Crimson Desert's boss design, both visually and mechanically, has turned the game into one of my most anticipated. In roughly 90 minutes, I found my footing and then proceeded to fight and hopefully defeat 4 bosses. Broken down by the length of time expected to defeat them, the 4 bosses represented the game's different fight styles and aesthetics: the Redevil, Whitehorn, Staglord, and the intimidating Queen Stoneback Crab. When each boss was explained to me, I decided to tackle them by going in with the style that I'm most used to, instead of starting with the ones that had a style that I'm not. So my preview began with Whitehorn. The creature design with this first boss is honestly breathtaking. A folkloric beast that reminded me of some Korean webtoon renditions of Haete. It beautifully highlights the variety of folkloric elements, even in a heavily Celtic and Norse-inspired game. A snowy creature on a mountain with horns, Whitehorn's fight style is what you would expect. There's a lot of charging and more than a few AoEs, plus a weather event that rains down really dangerous ice. This makes dodging your biggest strength. Well, that and the explosive arrows. Once you figure out Whitehorn's rotation, avoiding him is the easiest part, but when your combat relies on combo inputs, it can get difficult to know when you have a window to attack and when you're getting greedy and you're just going to suffer from those consequences. That keeps the difficulty engaging without ever making the boss feel overwhelmed. Explained as being one of the easier fights, smart use of range attacks and big heavy attacks deal enough damage to get you through, but the most fun part of the boss fight is the fact that you can actually climb on Whitehorn's back and inflict damage while attacking with one hand and holding onto his fur with the other. After Whitehorn, I then took on Crimson Desert's Staglord. Dressed in Celtic armor with gorgeously ornate weaponry that you can collect upon beating him, Staglord is a sword and board boss. Since you play as Kliff, who also uses the same weapons, much of the fight is best done by dodging into a parry and then landing a post-parry attack to deal the most damage. That said, blocking Staglord's attacks has to be strategic. He doesn't hit as many times as Whitehorn before him or the boss that I'm going to play after him, but it takes away large chunks of your health when he does land one. Even when you block, the chip damage from the blocks does add up, with an unblockable attack putting you at a disadvantage if you choose to take the hit. I almost died a few times. The Staglord's pacing and rotation are easy to nail, but to defeat him you have to settle into your own rotation. For me, that meant using a heavy attack combo at any time that I got him to stagger after a successful parry. My health dropped dramatically when I spent too much time trying to vary my combos up, or when I got greedy and tried other inputs. Both Whitehorn and Staglord are slower boss battles, but neither feels stale. Instead, they force the player to learn the boss fight and their different phases, and ultimately practice and then execute a successful rotation in order to come out on top. To be honest, it reminds me a lot of like MMOs. That said, combat styles and combos that come with them are personal choices each player will make. But the way that each heavy-hitting boss moves to a rhythm makes syncing with their attacks and finding their telegraphs extremely engrossing. While the first two bosses play off each other well, the last two offer stark difference in combat strategy and introduce new mechanics to the game. My third boss battle was with the Reed Devil, a vision out of a Robert Eggers film. The Reed Devil is about stealth and speed. The boss uses clones and distractions to keep you from finding your footing in the fight. While he doesn't do the damage that the two previous bosses dealt, the speed with which he dishes out multiple strikes at once causes a death by 1,000 cuts effect, which was how the reps in the room described him. Additionally, he summons wicker totems that must be destroyed while you take damage from the Reed Devil the entire time. My strategy, I Rambo'd it, I just hit him. Essentially, my goal was to keep the gap closed so that when he disappeared and reappeared, it was easier for me to locate him. Ultimately, the Reed Devil feels like a boss you have to burn through, lest he take chip after chip of your health until you have nothing left. This one is less about dodging and more about letting go and being unafraid to take damage and meet it when it comes. Across the first three bosses, combat is the focus. Stay alive, do damage, just beat it however you can. But with Queen Stoneback Crab, well, you can't do any of that. While some might find this boss design a little too disparate from the rest of the boss lineup, its inclusion in the demo is ambitious and shows off the boss variety in a truly splendid way. For Queen Stoneback Crab, you have to break formations that guard weak spots, deal damage to those weak spots, and then finally perform a very specific combo to break the chimney on the top of her head. Awakened and seemingly in pain, breaking the chimney settles her and lulls her back into becoming a part of the gorgeous landscape. While there are only 3 steps to completing the boss battle, its time designation is long. Queen Stoneback Crab is all about finesse and understanding the mechanics of the game. You have to time your combo and understand just how far to swing, the right time to deal damage, and honestly, the right time to wait. Truthfully, I didn't beat the boss in 1 try, and to be honest, I didn't even beat her after 10 tries. But the challenge that this battle gave me never got too frustrating. Instead, almost like a good Soulsborne game, I learned a little more each time I failed. Leaning forward in my chair, I tried and tried and tried and tried, and let's just add another 11 tries onto that, and then finally, I got it. At the time of my demo, I was the first journalist to clear the boss, though I'm sure I'm not alone now since it's been about a week since I've played. The only time you come close to dying is if you're stuck under the boss's feet. Understanding that not all boss battles require brute strength lends to the exploration first design of the game. The world has different rules for what you will encounter, and it is exceptionally exciting to think about what the final game will hold. As much as combat is about killing enemies, it can also be about solving puzzles. When you combine that with the combo structure, the level of engagement that Crimson Desert offers is an immediate reason to add this to any most anticipated list. While defeating the 4 bosses in the Crimson Desert demo got me hooked because of the combat, I'd be remiss not to mention just how beautiful the game is as a whole. Developed on Pearl Abyss's proprietary next-generation Black Space engine, the game's hyper-realistic character models never falter in combat or out of it. Kliff remains gruff and expressive and handsome, if I'm honest, and the combat animations are sharp. But it's the ragdoll mechanics that come whenever you're bucked off of Whitehorn or Staglord to send you flying. Add in the fact that there is a seamless transition from cutscene to gameplay, and this is a high bar for Pearl Abyss to meet on the game's release. As a whole, Crimson Desert is strong. Its combat feels fresh and doesn't allow you to disengage in an extremely exhilarating way. With the release date still a mystery, Crimson Desert is definitely one to look out for.